The first thing I heard that morning was my own dispatcher's voice crackling through a deputy radio, while an HOA president screamed that I was holding an entire neighborhood hostage. I was standing beside a locked steel gate at the end of Mercer Lake Road with a coffee thermos in one hand and 40 years of county maintenance records sitting in the cab of my old Ford truck behind me. Across from me stood Colleen Voss in white tennis clothes and pearl sunglasses, waving her phone around like she was commanding a SWAT team instead of throwing a tantrum over a private road that had existed longer than her entire subdivision. Then dispatch said my name. Everything changed. Unit 12, be advised, caller is reporting obstruction at Mercer Private Lake Access Road. There was a pause. A long one. Then another voice came over the radio, quieter this time. Wait, Mercer as in Captain Wade Mercer? Colleen's smile twitched for half a second before she covered it up with another fake laugh and pointed a finger straight at my chest. I don't care who he used to be, she snapped. This road serves Silver Pine Shores residents now, and he cannot legally block emergency access. I took another sip of coffee and looked past her shiny white Escalade toward the line of SUVs stacked behind her like angry little dominoes. Half those people had fishing poles in the back. The other half carried coolers and folding chairs because Memorial Day weekend was coming and Colleen had promised them exclusive community lake privileges in the brochures she used to sell those homes. There was just one problem with that promise. She never owned the road. The gate beside me rattled softly in the morning wind while fog rolled off Mercer Lake behind the trees, thick and silver like smoke drifting across the water. My father built that road himself in 1982 with an old military bulldozer he bought at auction after a flood wiped out the county launch route. Every rock under those tires, every drainage ditch, every cedar post along that gravel shoulder had been maintained by my family for over 4 decades. Colleen moved here 11 months ago. Big mistake. You're interfering with public safety. She yelled loud enough for the neighbors filming on their phones to hear. If somebody has a heart attack down there, that's on you. I finally spoke. Funny thing about public safety, I said. You should probably know who trained the dispatcher before calling 911 on him. The crowd went quiet for a second. Just enough. Then the sirens appeared through the trees. 2 sheriff SUVs rolled slowly toward the gate, throwing dust into the Tennessee sunrise, while Colleen folded her arms like she'd already won. I could almost see the victory speech forming in her head. HOA presidents like Colleen always think paperwork only matters when they're holding it. That's the dangerous part. Deputy Nolan Pierce stepped out first, tall kid with sandy hair and mirrored sunglasses. The same kid I trained fresh out of the academy 12 years ago, after he nearly failed his first traffic stop because he was too polite to interrupt people. He looked at me, then at Colleen, then at the locked gate. Morning, Captain, he said. Colleen blinked hard. One of the neighbors lowered their phone. Another deputy climbed out behind Nolan carrying a county map tube under his arm. And that was the moment I realized dispatch already knew exactly what this call really was. Not an emergency, not obstruction, a property fight, a recorded one. Colleen marched toward the deputies before either man could say another word and started talking fast, the way people do when panic sneaks into their throat before their brain catches it. This man illegally locked residents out of community lake access, she said. Our HOA attorney already confirmed we have easement rights. Nolan looked at me again. I shrugged once. You may want to ask her to show you those easement papers, I said. Because the county sure couldn't find them yesterday. Dead silence. Even the birds stopped making noise for a second. If you've ever dealt with one of these HOA power trips before, drop a comment below and tell me what state you're watching from, because trust me, this road fight was about to turn into something a whole lot bigger than a locked gate. Nolan slowly walked toward the gate, while Colleen kept talking behind him like volume alone could change property law. The early morning air smelled like wet cedar and lake water. And somewhere down near the shoreline, an old aluminum fishing boat knocked softly against Wade's dock with that hollow metallic clunk he had heard almost every morning for 30 years. Most people looking at that road only saw gravel and trees. Wade saw his whole life sitting there. He kept one hand resting on the steel gate while the deputies looked over the county map tube because that gate was the last thing his wife touched before she died. 3 years earlier, Karen Mercer had stood right there in a faded Tennessee Volunteers sweatshirt, holding a thermos of coffee while the sun came up over Mercer Lake. Her chemotherapy treatments had gotten harder by then, and some mornings she barely had enough strength to walk from the porch to Wade's old truck, but she always insisted on riding down to the dock with him anyway, because she said the lake smelled like peace before sunrise. Some people pray in church. Karen prayed sitting beside that water wrapped in a blanket listening to loons echo across the cove. Wade still remembered the sound of gravel crunching under those tires the last morning she ever came down there. He never forgot it. Back in 1982, Wade's father Earl Mercer built the lake road after a spring flood washed out the county launch route during a storm that trapped 3 families across the water overnight. Earl had served in Vietnam before coming home to eastern Tennessee, and he trusted bulldozers more than politicians. He bought an old Army surplus machine with money saved from logging work and spent almost 8 months carving that narrow road through cedar trees and clay hills by hand. Wade was 17 back then, skinny as a fence rail and dumb enough to think carrying railroad ties in august heat built character. Maybe it did. Every drainage pipe under that road had been replaced twice since then. Every culvert had maintenance records. Every foot of gravel had tax receipts older than Colleen's entire career in real estate. Wade kept all of it organized in labeled boxes inside the hall closet of his cabin because Earl Mercer drilled one lesson into his son harder than anything else. Never argue louder, Earl used to say. Argue with paperwork. That advice turned Wade into one of the most respected sheriff captains in Bell County. He spent 34 years handling land disputes, storm evacuations, drunk boaters, hunting accidents, and neighbor fights over property lines that usually started with one bad fence and ended with 3 lawyers billing by the hour. Wade learned something important during those years. The loudest person in a property fight is usually the one standing on the weakest ground. Colleen had been loud since the day she arrived. Silver Pine Shores showed up fast about a year earlier after a development company from Florida bought farmland north of the lake and turned it into 112 beige lake houses with stone mailboxes and tiny trees planted too close together. The brochures promised luxury waterfront living, even though most of those homes could barely see the water through the hills. Then Colleen Voss rolled in driving that white Escalade with Florida plates and enough gold jewelry to blind somebody in direct sunlight. Within 4 months, she became HOA president. Within 6 months, she started acting like she owned half the county. First came the little things. HOA signs appeared near the old boat ramp. Then golf carts started cutting through Wade's road because GPS apps labeled it as lake access. Then strangers began showing up at his dock, carrying coolers, asking where the community picnic area was. Wade corrected them politely at first. Most apologized and left. Colleen did not. She marched onto Wade's porch one humid afternoon carrying a binder thick enough to stop a door and smiled, that fake smile people use when they already decided they are smarter than you. "We should really discuss shared access solutions," she said while staring past him toward the lake. Wade leaned against the porch rail and kept his voice calm. "No need," he told her. "Road's private." Colleen laughed softly like he had told a cute joke. "Nothing stays private forever around growing communities, Mr. Mercer." That was the first moment Wade realized she was not just entitled. She was planning something. And standing beside that locked gate now, watching those deputies study county records while Colleen's confidence slowly started cracking around the edges, Wade could feel the exact moment the whole situation beginning to shift. Quietly, like ice breaking under somebody's boots. Colleen Voss had a talent for showing up exactly where she did not belong. 2 days after that first porch conversation, Wade woke up to the sound of engines humming outside his cabin just after sunrise. And when he stepped onto the porch with his coffee mug, he found 3 golf carts parked beside his fence while half a dozen strangers wandered down toward the lake, carrying folding chairs and beach bags like they had rented the place for the weekend. One guy in a bright orange fishing shirt even nodded politely at Wade and said, "Beautiful community access down here, sir." Community access. Those 2 words sat in Wade's chest like bad food all morning. He followed the tire tracks back toward the road and found fresh wooden signs planted every 100 yards along the gravel shoulder. Silver Pine Shores Private Lake Entry. White lettering. HOA logo in the corner. Cheap wood. Wade pulled one out of the ground and tossed it into the bed of his truck. Then another. Then another. By noon, Colleen herself came rolling up in her Escalade with sunglasses bigger than pancakes and a clipboard resting in her lap like she worked for the governor's office. Those signs cost money. she said the second she stepped out. Wade leaned against the truck bed and stared at her quietly for a moment. So does trespassing. Her smile tightened. You really want to make enemies out of your neighbors? Wade looked past her toward the subdivision sitting on the hill above the lake. Rows of beige houses packed together so tight they looked copy-pasted from a catalog. Most of them are not my neighbors, he said calmly. Most of them just got lied to. That hit harder than he expected because Colleen's whole face changed for half a second before the fake confidence slid back into place. Then came the brochures. A week later, one ended up in Wade's mailbox folded beside his electric bill. On the front was a smiling family standing beside Mercer Lake under giant words that read private resort-style water access for all residents. Wade stared at that paper for a long time while the old ceiling fan clicked slowly above his kitchen table. The brochure included photos of his dock. His actual dock. Karen's flower boxes still hanging beside the railing. Somebody had taken those pictures from Wade's shoreline without permission and used them to help sell houses starting at $680,000. That was when Wade stopped thinking this was simple HOA stupidity. This smelled bigger. The next Saturday, things escalated again. Wade was halfway through repairing an old cedar fence near the gate when 3 black SUVs rolled down the gravel road carrying members of the HOA board. Men in polo shirts. Women wearing matching visors. One carried a drone controller in his hand, while another unloaded bottled water from a cooler like they were preparing for a tailgate party instead of invading private property. Colleen climbed out last wearing spotless white sneakers that somehow never touched dirt. We are conducting a community infrastructure review, she announced. Wade rested both hands on his shovel handle. You are standing on private land. One of the board members laughed under his breath. Another pointed toward the lake and whispered something about kayak rentals. Wade noticed none of them asked permission before walking around his property, snapping photos with phones and tablets. One woman even measured part of the shoreline with a tape measure while talking about picnic table placement. The nerve of these people almost impressed him. Almost. Colleen strutted toward the old wooden gate beside the road and tapped the faded Mercer Lake access sign with one manicured fingernail. This road is creating unnecessary restrictions for homeowners, she said loudly enough for the others to hear. Emergency response times could become a liability issue. Wade looked at her carefully, then nodded once toward the gate. You know what else becomes a liability issue? He asked. Selling access rights you do not own. Dead quiet. The drone guy slowly lowered his controller. One of the board members shifted awkwardly like he suddenly regretted being there. But Colleen did not back down because people like her mistake confidence for intelligence all the time. She walked closer until her expensive perfume mixed with the smell of fresh-cut cedar and lake mud. You might have gotten away with this attitude years ago, she said softly, but growth changes things. Wade looked straight past her toward the subdivision hill again, where construction crews were still hammering away on new houses. More families, more sales, more promises built on top of that road. Then he glanced back at Colleen and gave the smallest smile she had seen yet. That road survived floods, he said. Lawyers do not scare it much. And for the first time since arriving at Mercer Lake, Colleen looked unsure. The first real fight started 3 weeks later when Wade came back from town and found a construction crew cutting trees beside the lake road without permission. Fresh cedar branches covered the gravel shoulder like somebody dumped green carpet across the ditch, and orange survey flags had been hammered into the ground all the way down toward the waterline. One worker stood beside a skid steer machine drinking sweet tea, while another painted white utility marks directly across Wade's property fence. Nobody even looked nervous. That was the crazy part. Wade parked his truck slowly and stepped out into the July heat, while cicadas screamed from the trees overhead loud enough to rattle the air. Who told you boys to work down here? He asked calmly. The younger worker pointed up the hill towards Silver Pine Shores without even looking up from his phone. HOA expansion project, he muttered. Community walking path. Wade stared at him for a second. Then at the machine parked 10 feet from Karen's flower boxes near the dock. Then at the fresh-cut mark spray painted beside his fence posts. His jaw tightened. You got permits for this property? The older worker finally looked uncomfortable and wiped sweat off his neck with a dirty rag. Buddy, we just do what we are hired to do. Wrong answer. Wade walked straight back to his truck, opened the passenger door, and pulled out a thick yellow folder full of county maps and land plats folded from years of use. He spread them across the hood, while hot wine rattled the papers around his hands. The younger worker glanced down at the documents and immediately stepped backward when he realized parcel lines ran directly through the area they had already started clearing. "Oh hell," he whispered under his breath. 10 minutes later, Colleen arrived in that white Escalade again, this time with her HOA attorney sitting beside her wearing loafers too shiny for Tennessee dirt roads. The attorney climbed out first carrying a leather briefcase, while Colleen stayed behind her sunglasses pretending she already owned the outcome. Wade recognized the lawyer immediately. Brent Halpern, real estate specialist from Knoxville. Expensive guy? Too expensive for a simple HOA dispute. "Mr. Mercer," Brent began smoothly, "Silver Pine Shores has obtained provisional development approval for a pedestrian easement connecting residents to recreational shoreline areas." Wade kept flipping through papers without looking up. "No, you did not." Brent smiled politely. "The county believes otherwise." Wade stopped turning pages and tapped one weathered survey map with his finger. "County rejected that easement request 14 months ago." Silence. Colleen shifted slightly beside the SUV. Brent cleared his throat and tried another angle. "That rejection only applied to the original filing structure." Wade finally looked up. "You mean the filing where your client claimed this road was abandoned county access?" Brent did not answer immediately. That told Wade everything. The construction workers quietly started backing their equipment away while the conversation kept getting colder. Even they could feel something was off now. Colleen stepped forward before her attorney could respond and crossed her arms tightly against the heat. "This community needs lake access," she snapped. "Families paid good money to live here." Wade nodded once toward the subdivision hill where more beige rooftops sat baking under the Tennessee sun. "Then somebody sold those families something they did not own." That landed hard. Brent quickly stepped in again before Colleen exploded completely. "Nobody is accusing anyone of wrongdoing here," he said carefully. Wade folded the map shut. "You should be." Dead quiet again. Then came the moment that changed everything. A black pickup truck rolled slowly down the gravel road behind the construction crew and parked near the gate. County Planning Department logo on the side. Out stepped Harold Baines, 72 years old, suspenders, white mustache. Been working county records since Ronald Reagan was president. Harold looked at the survey stakes. Then at Wade. Then at Colleen. His expression soured instantly. "Tell me those are not new markers," he muttered. Nobody answered. Harold walked over to one of the orange flags and yanked it straight out of the ground. "This parcel was never approved for public conversion," he said flatly. "Who authorized this?" Brent started speaking fast after that. Too fast. Talking about revised filings and infrastructure reviews and temporary access classifications. Harold listened for about 10 seconds before cutting him off with one raised hand. "Son," he said calmly, "I filed the rejection myself." Colleen's face lost color right there beside the road. Wade did not say a word. He just watched the panic begin spreading across the group one person at a time while the workers quietly loaded equipment back onto trailers. That was when Wade finally understood what Colleen had really done. She had not just lied to homeowners. She had built an entire sales pitch around access rights that legally never existed. And if that came out publicly, Silver Pine Shores was sitting on a financial landmine big enough to blow the whole subdivision apart. After Harold Baines pulled those survey flags out of the ground, the whole mood around Mercer Lake changed. Before that day, most people in Silver Pine Shores treated Wade like some stubborn old man blocking progress, because that was the story Colleen kept feeding them at HOA meetings. But once county officials started questioning those easement filings out in public, little cracks began spreading through the neighborhood fast. People started asking questions. Dangerous questions. The first sign came 3 days later when Wade stopped by Nolan's Bait and Feed near Highway 14 to grab diesel for his tractor. The place smelled like coffee, grease, and fish bait the way all good Tennessee stores should, and half the county usually ended up there before lunch. Wade noticed conversations slowing down when he walked inside. Not hostile. Curious. Old Mr. Gentry looked up from the coffee counter and scratched his beard slowly. "You really own that whole lake road?" Wade grabbed a jug of motor oil off the shelf. "Since Reagan was president." Another guy sitting near the window leaned forward. "Then how's that subdivision advertising private lake access?" Wade shrugged once. "That's a good question. By the next week, everybody around Bell County was asking the same thing. The problem for Colleen was simple. Once people start wondering if they got lied to during a $600,000 home purchase, they stop acting polite real quick. One couple from Silver Pine Shores showed up at Wade's gate on a humid Thursday evening carrying a folded brochure and looking nervous as church kids outside the principal's office. The husband introduced himself as Eric Dalton, retired Air Force, moved down from Ohio 6 months earlier. His wife kept staring back toward the subdivision hill while cicadas buzzed through the trees overhead. "Sir," Eric said carefully, "our realtor told us this road was permanent HOA access." Wade leaned against the fence quietly. "Did your paperwork say that?" Eric hesitated, then unfolded the brochure slowly. Just the advertisement. There it was. Wade could almost hear Earl Mercer laughing in his head right then. Never trust promises that are not written down. Wade invited them onto the porch and spent 20 minutes explaining property easements using old county maps spread across the table beside Karen's flower pots. No yelling, no threats, just facts. By the time the Daltons left, Eric looked pale. His wife looked angry, and neither of them looked like HOA supporters anymore. Word spread fast after that. Suddenly more residents started noticing strange things about Silver Pine Shores. The so-called community kayak launch existed only in brochures. The walking trail project had no approved county permits. Several homeowners discovered their closing packets never actually guaranteed lake access rights in legally binding language. Colleen had sold them a lifestyle first and details second. Big mistake. But instead of backing down, she doubled down harder than ever. One Saturday morning, Wade woke up to the sound of chainsaws again and drove toward the gate to find temporary barricades blocking the county launch road 2 miles north of the subdivision. Orange signs pointed all lake traffic back toward Mercer Road with giant arrows and HOA logos stamped across the bottom. Wade stared at those signs for a long moment while heat shimmered off the pavement. Then he saw the fake county seal printed in the corner. His expression changed immediately. That crossed a line. He drove straight to the sheriff's office with one of the signs tossed in the truck bed. The deputy at the front desk nearly laughed when he saw it. "This is not even close to an official county sign," he said. Wade nodded slowly. "I figured." 2 hours later, deputies removed every barricade personally while frustrated homeowners watched from golf carts near the subdivision entrance. Colleen stood there furious in white capri pants arguing with anyone who would listen while deputies loaded the fake signs into evidence trucks. "This is harassment," she snapped loudly. "We are trying to improve community access." Deputy Nolan kept his voice calm. "Ma'am, using fake county markings is not improving anything." Her face went red instantly. Then came the fireworks disaster. 4th of July weekend brought hundreds of visitors around Mercer Lake, and Colleen decided that would be the perfect time to host a giant HOA celebration near the shoreline. Wade found out when pickup trucks full of folding chairs and coolers started rolling down toward the gate before sunrise. Somebody even hung red, white, and blue balloons on Karen's old cedar fence beside the dock. Wade locked the gate immediately. 15 minutes later, the yelling started. Homeowners crowded outside demanding entry while Colleen marched back and forth with a phone pressed against her ear. One guy shouted that he paid HOA recreation fees for this event. Another woman complained her grandchildren were already waiting at the lake. Wade stood quietly beside the gate with his coffee thermos watching the chaos build while boats floated peacefully across the morning water behind him. Then Colleen finally screamed the words Wade had been waiting weeks to hear. "Call dispatch," she yelled. "Tell them he is illegally blocking emergency lake access again." Wade looked at Nolan, who had just arrived in another sheriff SUV, and slowly shook his head once. "She still does not get it," he muttered quietly. Nolan sighed. "No, sir," he said. "I do not think she does." Then dispatch answered the radio, and this time the entire neighborhood was listening. The second dispatch answered Colleen's call over the radio, the crowd around Mercer Road went completely silent. Kids holding fishing poles stopped talking. Homeowners standing beside golf carts leaned closer to listen. Even the flags tied around the HOA picnic tables barely moved in the heavy July air while the dispatcher's calm voice crackled through Deputy Nolan's shoulder radio. "Unit 12, be advised we already have prior documentation attached to this location regarding disputed private access rights." Colleen threw both hands into the air immediately. "Disputed?" she snapped loudly. There is nothing disputed about this road. Wade stayed quiet beside the gate, while Nolan slowly turned the radio volume down. Big mistake. Because the more Colleen talked, the more people around her started realizing this was not some simple misunderstanding anymore. This was legal trouble. Serious legal trouble. One older homeowner stepped toward Colleen, holding one of the HOA brochures in his hand. "You told us this access was permanent," he said carefully. Another woman near the picnic tables folded her arms tightly. "My closing agent said the same thing." Colleen forced another smile, but it looked shaky now. "Everybody needs to calm down," she said quickly. "This is just a temporary paperwork issue." Wade finally looked up from his coffee thermos. "Funny," he said calmly. "Temporary. Paperwork issues usually do not involve fake county signs." Nobody answered that. Then dispatch spoke again through the radio. "Unit 12, County Records Supervisor requesting photographs of all posted access signage for documentation review." That changed the mood instantly. Several homeowners exchanged nervous looks. One man quietly folded his brochure and slipped it into his back pocket like he suddenly regretted carrying it in public. Colleen tried to regain control fast. "This is harassment," she said sharply toward Nolan. "My residents are being denied recreational access they paid for." Nolan sighed softly and rubbed one hand across his forehead. "Ma'am," he said carefully, "did your HOA ever receive recorded easement approval from Bell County?" Colleen opened her mouth, closed it. Then Brent Halpern suddenly stepped forward from behind the crowd like he had been waiting for the right moment to interrupt. Wade had not even noticed the attorney arrive. Brent adjusted his tie and smiled that smooth lawyer smile again. "My client has every reason to believe access negotiations were ongoing," he said. Wade almost laughed at that wording. Access negotiations. Not approval. Not ownership. Negotiations. Tiny words matter in property law. Earl Mercer taught him that before Wade even learned how to shave. One wrong word can cost somebody a farm. Brent continued talking while sweat rolled down the back of his neck in the Tennessee heat. "At this stage," he said carefully, "it would be premature for anyone to jump to conclusions regarding subdivision disclosures." Wade watched him closely, then glanced toward the homeowners standing around the gate. Most of them looked confused now. One couple looked angry. Another woman had already pulled out her phone searching through digital closing documents right there beside the road. The dominoes were starting to fall. Quietly, Wade turned toward Nolan. "Mind if I show them something?" Nolan nodded once. Wade walked back to his truck and opened the passenger door slowly while every set of eyes followed him. Inside sat 3 thick storage binders full of maps, county filings, maintenance receipts, and easement requests, dating back decades. He carried the binders to the hood of the truck and opened the first one carefully beside the gate. Old papers, faded signatures, county stamps, real records. This road was registered private maintenance access in 1984, Wade explained calmly while flipping pages. County denied public conversion twice. Once in 1996. Again last year. Brent stepped closer fast. Too fast. "These documents do not necessarily reflect current development negotiations," he interrupted. Wade flipped one more page and tapped the rejection stamp near the bottom. Signed by Harold Baines himself. Brent went quiet again. The homeowners did not. Questions started flying everywhere after that. "Wait, we do not own lake access. Then why are we paying HOA recreation fees? Did the developer know this? What exactly did we buy?" Colleen tried answering all of them at once while panic crept into her voice harder with every sentence. "The subdivision still has recreational value," she insisted. "Amenities are still under expansion review." One homeowner laughed bitterly. "Lady, you sold us lakefront living without lake access." That one hurt. Wade could see it land right across her face. Then came the moment Wade had been waiting for since this entire mess started. Dispatch radio crackled again. "Unit 12, County Attorney requesting immediate hold on all HOA roadway modifications pending fraud review." Fraud review. The second those two words hit the air, the entire crowd exploded into nervous chatter. Brent Halpern's expression changed instantly. Gone was the smooth, confident attorney from earlier. Now he looked like a man mentally calculating billable hours and escape routes at the same time. Colleen looked even worse. "Fraud," she snapped. "That is ridiculous." Wade closed the binder slowly and locked eyes with her across the gate. "No," he said quietly. "Selling something you do not own is ridiculous. Dead silence followed that one. Even the fireworks setup crew stopped unloading supplies near the shoreline. Then one homeowner near the back finally asked the question nobody wanted to hear out loud. "If this road closes," he said slowly, "what happens to our property values?" Wade looked toward the subdivision sitting above the lake hill in the afternoon heat. Rows of expensive homes built around promises that were suddenly falling apart piece by piece. Then he looked back at the crowd. "That," he said calmly, "depends how honest your HOA has been with you." And judging by the terrified look on Brent Halpern's face, the answer was about to get very ugly. The fraud review announcement spread through Silver Pine Shores faster than a brush fire in August. By Monday morning, homeowners were marching into the HOA clubhouse carrying folders, screenshots, closing documents, and enough anger to crack concrete. Wade heard about most of it from Deputy Nolan, who stopped by the cabin that evening with 2 black coffees and a tired look on his face. "You should have seen that meeting," Nolan muttered while sitting on the porch swing Karen used to love. "Folks are losing their minds." Wade stared out toward the lake while the last orange sunlight reflected off the water through the trees. "Told you she sold them promises," he said quietly. Nolan shook his head slowly. "It is worse than that." Then he handed Wade a printed email. The subject line read, "Emergency HOA Board Liability Session." Wade read the first paragraph once, then again slower. His expression hardened immediately. Colleen and Brent Halpern were not just trying to protect access rights anymore. They were trying to bury evidence before county investigators got deeper into the records. One sentence near the bottom stood out most. "All recreational marketing language should be considered conceptual pending legal clarification." Conceptual. Wade almost laughed out loud sitting there on the porch. Families had spent retirement money buying homes based on conceptual lake access. That was not just shady. That was dangerous. Nolan leaned forward and lowered his voice. "County attorney thinks somebody altered subdivision filings after the rejection notice came through." Wade looked up sharply. "You sure?" Nolan nodded. Harold found 2 versions of the same access application in the archive system. There it was. The real problem finally crawling into daylight. Wade spent the next 2 days digging through old county records with Harold Baines inside the basement archive room under the courthouse. The place smelled like dust, coffee stains, and old paper, with metal shelves packed so tight they looked ready to collapse under 50 years of Tennessee property fights. Harold moved slowly these days because of his bad knees, but the old man still knew every filing cabinet in that building better than most people know their own kitchens. "People think computers changed everything," Harold grumbled while flipping through folders. "Nah, liars just got faster." Wade smiled faintly at that. Then Harold found it. 2 easement filings. Same parcel number. Same request date. Different language. The original filing clearly showed Mercer Road classified as denied private conversion access. But the second version included an extra paragraph typed into the digital copy claiming, "Pending emergency roadway review authorization." Fake wording. Fake classification. Fake authority. Wade stared at the page while a cold feeling settled into his chest. Somebody inside the process had tampered with county records after the denial. Harold adjusted his glasses slowly. "This language never existed in the original filing," he said quietly. "I would bet my pension on it." Wade leaned back in the chair and exhaled through his nose. "Then this whole subdivision got sold on forged paperwork." Harold nodded once. "Looks that way." Things got uglier fast after that discovery. County investigators started requesting development communications between the HOA, the builder, and Brent Halpern's law office. Silver Pine Shores residents flooded the county office demanding answers. One retired couple threatened legal action after learning their home appraisal specifically listed guaranteed private lake corridor access in the sales packet. Another homeowner discovered his mortgage company had already factored recreational access into the property valuation. Every answer led to another problem. Every document led to another lie. Meanwhile, Colleen completely lost control of the neighborhood. Somebody leaked part of the fraud review online, and suddenly local Facebook groups exploded with screenshots, angry comments, and homeowners demanding refunds. One post showed a side-by-side comparison between the fake county signs and real Bell County signage standards. Another resident uploaded drone footage proving HOA board members had trespassed across Wade's property multiple times during inspection tours. By Thursday night, Silver Pine Shores looked less like a luxury community and more like a crime scene with landscaping. Then Wade got the phone call. It came just after 9 at night, while rain tapped softly against the cabin roof and thunder rolled across the hills beyond the lake. Wade answered without checking the number first. Big mistake. You think you are clever? Colleen's voice snapped through the receiver sharp as broken glass. Wade stayed calm immediately. Evening to you too. She ignored that. You are turning these people against me. Wade looked out the dark kitchen window toward the road beyond the trees. No, he said quietly. Your paperwork did that. Colleen's breathing sounded uneven now. Panicked. Angry. Desperate. You have no idea what you are messing with, she hissed. There are contracts involved. Investors. Development agreements. Wade sat down slowly at the kitchen table where Earl Mercer's old survey maps still rested beneath the lamp. Then maybe you should not have built business plans on somebody else's property. Silence hit the line for 3 long seconds. Then Colleen finally said the one thing she should never have admitted out loud. Nobody was supposed to look that closely. Wade's eyes narrowed instantly. There it was. The truth hiding underneath all the HOA nonsense from the beginning. She never expected resistance because most people would have folded under legal threats, county language, and fake authority. But Wade Mercer spent 34 years dealing with scammers, bullies, and property fraud cases all across Bell County. He knew exactly how people behaved when their lies started collapsing. They got louder first, then sloppy, then scared. And Colleen Voss had officially entered the scared stage. 3 days after Colleen's late-night phone call, every homeowner in Silver Pine Shores received an emergency meeting notice taped to their front doors. Thick red letters across the top read Mandatory Community Stabilization Session, which sounded more like a hostage negotiation than an HOA meeting. Wade almost threw the paper away until Nolan called him just before sunset. You might want to come tonight, the deputy said quietly. County attorney is showing up. That got Wade's attention fast. The HOA clubhouse sat at the top of the subdivision hill overlooking Mercer Lake. All fake stone columns and expensive landscaping meant to impress buyers from out of state. But that evening the place felt different. Tense. Nervous. Cars lined both sides of the road while homeowners crowded near the entrance holding folders, closing packets, and printed screenshots from the county website. Nobody was smiling anymore. Wade parked his old Ford near the back beside Nolan's patrol SUV and noticed something else immediately. 2 county vehicles sat near the clubhouse entrance. One belonged to the planning office. The other belonged to the county attorney. Big problem. Inside the clubhouse, the air smelled like coffee, printer ink, and panic. Folding chairs filled the room wall to wall, while ceiling fans spun overhead, barely cutting through the July heat. Colleen stood near the front beside Brent Halpern, wearing a cream-colored blazer that probably cost more than Wade's truck tires. But for the first time since all this started, she looked tired. Really tired. Her makeup could not hide the stress around her eyes anymore. Homeowners started talking the second Wade walked inside. Some nodded politely now. Others moved out of his way completely. Funny how fast respect appears once paperwork enters the room. Wade took a seat near the back beside Nolan, while Colleen stepped to the microphone with both hands gripping the podium too tightly. Thank you all for coming, she began carefully. There has been a great deal of misinformation circulating regarding our community development rights. Half the room groaned immediately. One older man near the front stood up holding a sales brochure over his head. Did you or did you not sell us guaranteed lake access? Colleen forced another smile. The subdivision was marketed based on projected recreational integration. The room exploded after that. People shouted over each other while Brent Halpern tried calming everyone down with lawyer language nobody wanted to hear anymore. One woman slammed a folder onto the table and yelled that her retirement savings were tied up in that house. Another homeowner demanded to know why HOA dues included private waterfront maintenance fees if the waterfront was not actually theirs. Colleen kept trying to regain control, but every answer only made people angrier. Then the county attorney walked in. Dead silence hit the room instantly. Margaret Ellis was a small woman in her 60s with gray hair and reading glasses hanging from a chain around her neck. But Wade had watched hardened criminals sweat under that woman's voice during courtroom testimony for years. She carried a thin black folder into the room like it weighed 1,000 pounds. Behind her came Harold Baines holding archived documents under one arm. Wade knew right away this was over. Margaret reached the front table slowly and looked around the room before speaking. Before this meeting continues, she said calmly, Bell County requires clarification regarding multiple property representations connected to Silver Pine Shores development materials. Nobody breathed. Colleen stepped forward immediately. Our legal team is still reviewing those concerns, she interrupted. Margaret opened the folder without even looking at her. Your legal team should have reviewed them before selling 112 homes. That hit like a shotgun blast through the room. Brent Halpern started talking fast after that about administrative confusion and evolving development classifications, but Margaret cut him off with one sentence. Mr. Halpern, county records show altered language inside easement documentation submitted after rejection notices were already finalized. Brent stopped speaking immediately. Homeowners stared at him in disbelief. Then Harold Baines laid 2 copies of the same filing onto the front table for everyone to see. One original, one altered, side by side, different wording, different classification language, same signature block. Somebody in the crowd whispered, "Oh my God." Wade stayed quiet in the back while the room slowly turned against Colleen piece by piece. Then came the moment nobody expected. Eric Dalton stood up from the third row holding his home appraisal paperwork and shaking hands. My mortgage company increased our valuation because of permanent lake access, he said loudly. You told us this road was legally secured. Several homeowners immediately started pulling out their own documents after hearing that. More shouting, more panic. Colleen looked around the room like somebody trapped underwater searching for air. Then she made the worst decision possible. She pointed straight at Wade. This entire situation exists because he refused to cooperate with community growth. Wade slowly stood up from his chair. Quietly, calmly, dangerous. The room fell silent again. Wade walked toward the front carrying one old leather binder under his arm and stopped beside the podium where Colleen stood trembling with anger. Then he opened the binder slowly and placed Earl Mercer's original 1984 road registration onto the table beside the altered filings. Old county stamp, original signatures, tax records, maintenance contracts, 40 years of clean ownership, real paperwork. You kept calling this community access, Wade said evenly while looking directly at Colleen. But this road never belonged to your HOA. Not for 1 minute. Nobody spoke. Wade turned one more page in the binder and slid a printed dispatch transcript across the table. The same emergency call recording from the gate. The one where dispatch identified Mercer Road as private access before deputies even arrived. Margaret Ellis adjusted her glasses and read the transcript silently for several seconds. Then she looked directly at Colleen. You attempted enforcement actions after being informed the property was privately registered? Colleen opened her mouth, but nothing came out. That was it. The exact second everybody in that clubhouse realized Wade Mercer had been telling the truth the entire time while the HOA president had been building an entire luxury subdivision around a lie. The fallout hit Silver Pine Shores like a slow-moving landslide that nobody could stop once it started rolling. Within 48 hours of that clubhouse meeting, county investigators froze all pending development permits connected to the subdivision while mortgage lenders began requesting emergency reassessments on dozens of homes. Brent Halpern quietly removed his law firm from HOA representation by the following Monday morning. And Colleen Voss. She disappeared behind closed curtains inside her big Lakeview house, while process servers and angry homeowners lined up outside the neighborhood entrance almost every day. The woman who once strutted around Mercer Lake acting like a queen suddenly stopped answering her phone. Funny how fast power disappears when paperwork shows up. Wade mostly stayed out of the chaos after that. He spent his mornings repairing fence posts along the lake road and cleaning storm debris near the dock, while helicopters from local news stations occasionally circled above the subdivision hill searching for footage of the scandal. Nolan joked that half the county now treated Mercer Road like a tourist attraction. Wade hated that part. He never wanted attention. He just wanted people off his land. One afternoon, Eric Dalton stopped by again carrying a small tackle box under one arm and looking 10 years older than the first time Wade met him. Mind if I sit for a minute? He asked quietly. Wade nodded toward the porch swing. They sat there together listening to wind move through the cedar trees while boats drifted slowly across the lake below. Eric stared out toward the water for a long time before speaking again. My wife cried for 2 days after we found out, he admitted. We put our retirement into that place. Wade understood that feeling better than most people. Losing peace hurts worse than losing money sometimes. You did not build the lie, Wade said calmly. You just believed the wrong people. Eric nodded slowly and looked down at the fishing pole resting beside his boots. Guess I should have read the paperwork closer. Wade gave the smallest shrug. Most folks trust what they are told. That was the real tragedy buried under all the HOA nonsense. Most of those homeowners were not bad people. They were retirees, veterans, grandparents, families looking for a quiet place near water. Colleen sold them a dream wrapped in fancy brochures and legal-sounding language because she counted on nobody checking the details too carefully. But property law does not care about dreams. It cares about records. 3 weeks later, the county released its formal findings. Altered filings, misrepresented easement claims, unauthorized signage, false advertising connected to recreational access rights. The report stopped just short of criminal charges, but the financial damage was brutal. Multiple homeowners joined together in a civil lawsuit against the HOA board and the development company, while property values inside Silver Pine Shores dropped almost overnight once the truth became public. Some families moved out within months. Others stayed and tried rebuilding the community honestly. But nobody trusted Colleen anymore. Not even a little. Wade only saw her one last time after all of it ended. Early October morning. Cool air. Fog rolling low across Mercer Lake while leaves turned orange along the hillsides. Wade was replacing an old lock chain on the gate when a black SUV pulled quietly onto the shoulder nearby. Colleen stepped out alone wearing jeans and a gray sweatshirt instead of the expensive clothes she always used to wear. She looked smaller somehow. Tired. Human. For a long moment, neither of them said anything. Then Colleen glanced toward the lake and finally spoke in a softer voice than Wade had ever heard from her before. I never thought it would go this far, she admitted. Wade tightened the new lock slowly. That is the problem with shortcuts, he said. They usually lead somewhere. She looked down at the gravel road beneath her shoes. The developer promised the county stuff would get handled later, she muttered quietly. Everybody just kept moving forward. Wade nodded once because he had seen that exact story 100 times during his sheriff years. People convince themselves paperwork is a small problem right up, until it becomes a giant one. Colleen looked toward him again like she wanted to argue one last time, but there was no fight left in her anymore. Just embarrassment. You really kept every record since 1984? She asked. Wade locked the gate with a heavy metallic click that echoed softly through the trees. My father taught me something a long time ago, he said. Loud people scare easy when real documents show up. Colleen let out one tired breath through her nose, climbed back into the SUV, and drove away without another word. Wade watched the taillights disappear up the hill towards Silver Pine Shores until the road turned behind the trees. Then the morning got quiet again. Really quiet. The kind of quiet Mercer Lake used to have before all this mess started. Wade walked down toward the dock, carrying his fishing rod, while mist drifted across the water in slow silver waves. Karen's flower boxes still hung beside the railing exactly where she left them years ago, and somewhere across the lake a loon called through the fog, while sunrise painted the water gold. The gate stood locked behind him. The road stayed private. And for the first time in a long while, Mercer Lake finally felt like home again.